Good afternoon. The Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriation, and Housing is now called to order. For the record, today is Tuesday, June 22nd, 2021, and the time now is 2 o'clock. Notice for this public hearing were disseminated via email to all senators and all main media broadcasting outlets. First public notice was issued on June 15th, followed by June 17th. The committee will hear and accept testimonies on Bill 120-36, introduced by Senator Jim Moylan, co-sponsored by Vice Speaker Tina Rose Muña Barnes, myself, Senator Jose Pedo Terlaje, and Senator Mary Camacho Torres. An act to amend Section 101.01 and Section 101.03 of Chapter 10, Title 3 of Guam Code annotated relative to permanently establishing early in-office absentee voting. I'd like to acknowledge the senators that are present, my colleagues that are present today. We have the sponsor of the bill, Senator Jim Moylan, Senator Frank Blas, Senator Tony Atta, and Senator Joanne Brown. The general rules for the conduct of this public hearing is those testifying on behalf of Bill 120-36 are invited to the panel, and we have Ms. Maria Pangilinan and Mr. Thomas and Agustin from the Guam Election Commission. Written testimony shall be submitted to the committee. Please provide my legislative staff with your written testimony for photocopy. Testimony may be read, and lengthy testimony should be summarized to about 5 minutes, but we'll allow adequate time if needed. Those testifying will be allowed to present oral testimony. Once you're done, please remain on the room for questions or for additional testimony as may be desired by members of the committee. Questions and testimony shall be confined to the substance or nature of the agenda, which is on Bill 120-36. Personal inference as to the character or the motive of any senator or any individual testifying is not permitted. Any violation of this general rule of conduct will result in removal from the public hearing room. Proper form and decorum shall be practiced by all present in the public hearing room for these proceedings. Individuals who fail to maintain proper form and decorum may be restricted from providing oral testimony and will be removed from the room. When you speak, please make sure the microphone is on and that you speak into the microphone. You will state your name and your title for the record. We will now begin to discuss Bill 120-36 COR. And I ask the author of the bill to please make his opening statement. Thank you. Senator Moylan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the panel for being here today and my fellow colleagues. Bill 120 came about based on a bill we did last year, and it was due to the pandemic. And the Guam legislature passed a measure to allow for early in-office absentee voting for the 2020 general election. This process proved to be an extremely popular option for voters, as over 12,000 island residents took advantage of this opportunity, as they did not have to present any reason for voting early. Now, current Guam law allows for early absentee voting if the voter provides legitimate reasons and evidence of their inability to cast a vote on election day. But if Bill 120 is enacted, the legislation would provide for a 30-day window for early in-office absentee voting. And this will be a permanent option for all future elections. So no reason for voting would be needed, which is the main emphasis of this bill. So, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the opportunity to give brief introductions. I'm looking forward to the discussion on the bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Moylan. We have currently Maria Pangilinan from the Executive Director from the Guam Election Commission. She has testimony. She has written testimony, plus I'd like her to provide oral testimony, please. Ms. Pangilinan.
Hafade Guahusi Maria Pangilinan, Executive Director of Election Commission Guahan. Tzuz Masi for the opportunity to appear before you. The Guam Election Commission spent $487,000 for early voting for the 2020 primary and general election. There were 19 days, was cut short by the pandemic, of early voting for the primary and 45 days of early voting for the general election. Before 2020, duration of in-office voting was for 30 days, with about 1,000 voters participating on average for the general election. Over 12,000 voted early for the 2020 general election. Yes, this bill will promote voter participation. The GEC received $600,000 in CARES grant funding directly from the U.S. Election Assistance Commission, which covered most of the early voting expenses. The remainder was used for the runoff election. Permanent staff and 3 temporary staff hired for the election cycles every election year, and their overtime costs were expensed out of local appropriations. The Guam Election Commission estimates the additional cost of early voting to be $175,000 per election. To continue to conduct fair and honest elections, this must be included in legislation. Should this bill be enacted, the Guam Election Commission respectfully requests that the GEC fiscal year budget for 2022 be increased to $2,084,179 to cover the cost of early voting for the 2022 primary election. After reviewing Bill number 120-36, the GEC recommends that early voting should be a separate new section of Title III, Title III Guam Code Annotated, Chapter 10, as presented in my written testimony. It's there before you, and that's what we went through the bill. We've looked at how it would affect the rest of Chapter 10, absentee voting, how it will affect homebound voted, as well as the off-island voters. So we've looked at that, carefully looked at that, and we've come up with these recommendations for you, before you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Panglin, and thank you for your testimony, because you basically assisted us on how we're going to amend the bill, and we'll take care of that. That's not a problem. I'm in full support of this bill. I'll ask now the author of the bill if you have any questions for you, and then we'll proceed on from Senator Frank Blas, Senator Ada, and then Senator Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Maria, for your testimony. Yes, well, we had discussed in our previous meetings there of the different recommendations you have, and this is very helpful as well to strengthen the bill. If you can further specify these sections are needed to be kept in the current law and why you want it to become separate, can you highlight a little bit more, expand upon that a little bit more for us so to get a clearer understanding, please?
A good point to start off with is the absentee ballot application form. As you know, that form is used by off-island voters as well as UOCAVA voters. Those are the military and overseas voters, and homebound voters, and in the past, in-office absentee with excuse. If we were to use the same form or refer to that section, the chapter refers to it a few times. Instead of using that same form, we've opted to indicate what should be in the application form for in-office absentee, early voting. Another reason is that we would like in-office early voting to begin 30 days before the election, but we would like it to end 5 days before the election, so we can prepare the thousands of absentee ballots to go down to the precinct. For homebound voting, we would like to be able to go and service our homebound voters throughout all the 30 days and even on election day. Again, we made it separate so it doesn't affect all the other wheels, all the gears of Chapter 10.
Thank you. Continuing on with that, when we're saying off-island absentee voting, we're talking about mail-out ballots, right? When we're saying what this bill is focusing on is early voting here, right? And which will be possibly at your office location, which was very successful last time, or this could be a new location, that depends. But we're not, let me just clarify, we're not mailing, allowing anyone to mail any ballots. Ballots won't be mailed if you're on island. You must come in person. Is that correct? We're making that distinction very clear. Can you explain that, please?
Yes. Currently, as the law reads in Chapter 10, mail ballots, ballots cannot be mailed to people on island, okay? Even with our recommended changes to the bill, ballots still cannot be mailed to people on island. So what we do with off-island voters is they have up until 3 days before election to request for their ballot, for their absentee ballot. That still, we recommend that still stays. That has worked for us. That was enacted many years ago in the absentee law.
And therefore, this is why we want the separate sections, as you're recommending, yes, to eliminate any confusion with who gets to mail in their votes. And if you want to early vote and you're on Guam, you must come to the location, as we have experienced previously in the last election. And this is how you vote early on Guam if this bill becomes into laws. That's right? Oh, okay. Just a couple more questions there. If you can break down, again, explain your experience prior with early voting compared to just this last election of early voting. What were the numbers previously, once again, please?
So for 2020, in 2020, we had 12,227 voting in office. We also had 686 homebound voters, and we had 170 ballots that came in from off-island, for a total of 13,083 absentee voters. You know, Senator, in 2010, we had early voting for the first time and the last time before 2020. In 2010, we had a little over 3,700 show up for early voting. You know, it stopped because the law was passed that says no more early voting. You have to do it with excuse. From 2012 to 2018, the average is about 1,000 to come in to vote with excuse. 2012 was 1,012, 2014 was 998, 2016 was 921, and then 2018 was 1,042.
So I can see where the Election Commission will be in favor of this since it brought 12,000 versus what we were seeing in prior. So if we want more people to be interested in voting, exercising their right to vote, this is a step in the right direction, I would suppose, from your angle at the Guam Election Commission.
Yes, sir. You know, I was teasing the staff, but it's really true that this is probably one of the 2020 general election was one of the lowest voter turnout. So we want to help, we appreciate the help of the legislature to bring that back up. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Moylan. Senator Blas, do you have any questions for the panel? None? Senator Atta, do you have any questions for the panel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Madam Director, you brought up 2010. Is this prior to the law being repealed by Public Law 3158, I believe it was, right? So the law that was in place, is this what you on your testimony here, is this what that is, the law prior to the repeal of 3158? On your testimony here, where you're making the amendments to?
Yeah.
Or?
That part was intact, I believe. They just removed the early voting in 2010, you're right.
So would it be better to go back to the way the law was for early voting prior to the repeal of the law with 3158?
You know, I didn't look at that. The biggest problem with 2010, Senator Atta, is Tom was there and they were so understaffed and overwhelmed. They were not prepared for early voting. So it's really great that we're discussing it now so we can let you know what it will take. Senator, as far as going back to how it was before, dispensa, because I did not go back to the original, to that part of the code
To that
before
part
it
of the
was
law
repealed. Yeah,
prior
I
to the
didn't go
repeal?
back to that, yes.
So probably something that we can take a look at and see what the difference is from prior to the repeal to what's being introduced today.
Yes, and I'll get back to you before this goes to session.
That's
Thank
great.
you.
And then also, does what you're asking for to increase your budget to, would that cover for the primary election coming up, the upcoming primary election?
That's correct.
Correct.
But I must caution the legislature because we've issued out an invitation for bid and we're going through the procurement process. And right now there's a protest, but the lowest bidder is not the current location. So costs may go up, costs may go down, depending on the new location. But from the historical costs that we have and what we experienced in 2020 at the current location, we believe this is a good estimate of the cost.
But then you're not sure with the new, if the procurement goes forward and you're in the new location, if that cost would still remain the
That's
same.
correct. That's
Yeah.
correct.
And that's where we would have to be cautious as to whether you guys are going to have enough in your budget or you would need to have a supplemental budget to that to
Yes, sir.
cover the costs for that increase. Okay. All right. I think on the prior to the repeal, wasn't it, I think it was maybe, was it 2 weeks instead of 30 days that was early voting?
In 2010? It was 30 days.
It was 30 days
It was
prior.
still, yes, it was 30 days. I remember being in line to vote early.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, Senator, I believe the old bill, law just removed the requirement and just gave early voting. It was just allowed for early voting for the 30-day period.
Okay. So perhaps you're going to just take a look at it prior to the
Will do.
repeal with 3158 and then what it is with it. Okay. That sounds great. I don't have any questions. I just hope that, you know, we understand that you guys may have a shortfall in your budget. It depends on your location in the very near future, and if your budget would be enough for that. Okay, Mr. Chair, that's the only question I have. Thank you, Madam
Thank you.
Director.
Thank you, Senator Ada. Senator Brown?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to ask Ms. Pangilinan, what are the main costs? Because you were talking, if you explained that during this past election, we were able to get the CARES funding to cover the costs for early voting, and that if we're to proceed with implementing this particular bill and it were to become law, you're talking about $150,000 per election for primary and another $150,000 for the general election. What are the costs? What's encumbered by that cost for you at the Election Commission?
It would be the cost of additional staff,
Okay.
the cost of additional space, the cost of overtime for the additional staff and the permanent staff. Those are the big costs. In supplies, Senator Brown, in supplies, the biggest cost is envelopes.
Yes, I remember those big envelopes that you have to, and seal it, of course, until it's time to take them out to count them. And I guess, because, if you're doing that at $300,000 for both elections, we're talking about almost $29 per vote. And that's a significant cost. I think, of course, we want to encourage, especially, we used to brag that we have some of the highest voting levels on Guam, and now we're seeing a decline, and it could be a whole bunch of reasons. People also just being jaded about the process. Maybe it doesn't matter who they elect anymore. It's the same old story. So, I don't have a problem wanting to encourage people. We want to see more engagement, but I think we also realize it comes at a price. If you're talking almost $30 per ballot, that you're putting in place because you're allowing people to vote 30 days prior to the day of the election. That's something to consider because, $300,000 can go to adding on park rangers and conservation officers year-round. And so I would look at that just in terms of the financial cost. And is that something that's needed? Would that get more people? I'm just basing it on the 12,000 figure of voters. Would that get more voters to the polls? Because we were able to get in the polls when we didn't have this much advanced time. So I don't know if there's more to do that outreach to encourage people, because it's like, what is the real reason people are not wanting to vote like they used to? And then, of course, last year was a non-gubernatorial election, and then next year will be a gubernatorial election, and we see every time you have that gubernatorial election year, you see the increase in voters coming out. So hopefully next year we'll see an increase in the numbers. But I just think our colleagues and the public need to be aware that if we add on the additional 30 days and put that as part of the permanent structure, you were talking on average $30 per vote. And that's for me, that's an expensive vote because that's money we're not able to invest in other critical needs. And right now, we're, money's floating all over the place because of the federal funds coming in as a result of the pandemic. But once that dries up and we're here with the day-to-day realities of the budget, because this to me is not the real world. At least in my previous time in the legislature, it was never enough money to go around to meet all the demands. So I just think we need to be mindful of that. In your trends of voters, have you guys been able to analyze where the decrease is in voting by age, by any chance to know the profile of the voters, what has shifted? Do you have more people who are older in age coming to vote versus younger people? Are you seeing more younger people participating in the electoral process as a result of the recent elections, what those trends may be?
So the Election Comparative Analysis Report for the 2020 primary and general and the special election for the joint mayor, that gets to all of you next week, Wednesday.
Okay.
But to just summarize the age of the voter remains the same. The younger ones are not coming out to vote. And if you see the voter participation go down. One of the, we have a bigger pool of registered voters. In 2019, we implemented motor voter registration. So that brings us thousands of voters. I think, I don't remember the number offhand, I have it in my notes. But so, how many of those voters show up?
Right.
Yeah, so it looks dismal now. So we just got, DMV was, put it in place. Now we have more registered voters, but are they showing up?
Right.
And so that's the challenge we have. As far as the cost per ballot, we belong to the National Association of State Election Directors. There are of course, the 50 states and 5 territories, including DC, but there are 6,000 election jurisdictions. And these jurisdictions could be much bigger than ours. So their cost per ballot is much smaller than us. But the bottom line is our population base is so small. And if they saw, how much our ballots cost, one of the bigger costs is the redundancy we have to have here on Guam. If we need one machine, we have to buy 2. If we need, we always need site support. We don't want to rely, so that brings our costs up.
Yes.
And hence, recognizing that and knowing that, that's what it takes to protect and promote the foundation of our democracy. It's not an inexpensive task.
One other question I want to, how do you do any checks to verify the eligibility of people voting to make sure that they are indeed eligible to vote? I mean, I do understand the expansion of, even the motor voting to try to get more people in our community that are eligible to vote, but I also see the opportunity, unfortunately, for people who might not be eligible, who try to influence that process. And we've seen it happen in our own elections in the past. How do we verify that the people that are voting are eligible to vote?
Well, in 2015, the law was passed to eliminate proof of citizenship. So when a person comes to vote since 2015, all they'd have to do is swear that they're a U.S. citizen. We do verify their age by their ID that they present. They also just swear by their U.S. citizenship. And so we've instituted a practice with our registrars. Toward the middle of the affidavit of registration is the oath. There are 4 sections where they have to put in that they swear they're a U.S. citizen, they're a resident of Chalampago for 15 years. There's 4 little blanks that they have to fill out. So we've instituted a new procedure where the voter has to initial just one more step to make them understand that they have to be all this. In the election process, on election day, or at early voting, here's our list, our voter registry list. We try to keep it as clean as possible, and we do. So from that list, that's the foundation of our election process. We make sure that they're on that list. And 30 days up to 10 days before the election, they can actually register and vote at the same time, because voting closes 10 days before the election. Another way to catch is, and we don't catch them all, I have to say, is that they have to fill out the affidavit on the envelope, if you remember, Senator, that says, I swear I'm a U.S. citizen, And sometimes people who did not understand that process, when they were registering to vote, they say, but I'm not a US citizen. So we explain to them that thank you for letting us know, and we don't let them vote.
You know, I mean, I understand, again, the desire to get more people to vote, but how complicated. There's so many things we have to verify our citizenship with. And I am concerned because, you know, we have a lot of people coming into Guam. I simply want to make sure that those that do vote are eligible to vote, because we've seen attempts in the past to influence the electoral process. We've seen in the past where there's been evidence of individuals that have passed away and somehow miraculously, you know, rose from the dead, as you know, and I know we could chuckle at that. We know which election I'm talking about.
So,
that you know, were able to go in and vote, and then they didn't exist after that. So, I mean, we just want to make sure in our electoral process, and you know, however the people decide, that's ultimately their decision, but we want to make sure that's a legitimate decision of the people. So, I don't know. I really have to think about that a bit as to whether I'm comfortable. If I were running for higher office, I don't know that I'd be comfortable with that. I might want to go back and say no. I want because there's so many things now we have to verify our citizenship for. I mean, I can't get on a plane and go to the mainland without showing my passport, so I don't know why that would be complicated, or my birth certificate to show for voting, because I would like to think that there's nobody out there that will you know, not voluntarily sign an affidavit and they're not a U.S. citizen, but we've seen, I don't know if we've been around enough, Senator Ada, but we've seen enough in our time that, you know, make us question the actions of individuals and why they do what they do. But I just don't see that as a major hurdle of having people verify their citizenship. I mean, we have to do it with so many things that we do. Mm-hmm. I appreciate the process that you're explaining, but there's just something that gives me a little reservation, because it's very hard with your resources to go back and look at that long list with everything else you have to do to go back and verify. Mm-hmm. You know, people will lie. I could sit here and lie to you, and how would you know? You're just assuming you know me for a long time and I'm being upfront and honest, but do you really know? But I would be concerned about that. That's the kind of stuff that does concern me with voter fraud and things of that nature, because I see what's at stake, and I just want to make sure that those that do vote are eligible to vote. I'm not as comfortable with the affidavit process, but again, we're in the office now. Maybe we might look at changing it. Mm-hmm. One other thing I wanted to ask, because this has come up before, is if the parties take over the primary and the Election Commission does not conduct the primary, how much in cost would that reduce for the Guam Election Commission if that responsibility were turned over to the political parties to conduct the primary, or their respective primaries? Yeah.
So we've estimated the cost of the primary at $375,000.
Okay.
Yeah. Senator, and you mentioned people rising from the dead. Mm-hmm. So just so you know, the process is, I want you to know that the process is...
Has we since addressed that?
The process is that Public Health and Social Services sends us a death list every month, every 15th of the month. So you'll notice on our voter by precinct reports that we do release.
Now you remove their names from the voter list.
I think they've been doing it even before.
Okay.
Yes. You know, a lot of us go off island for medical referral, and
sure.
Unfortunately, if you die off island, it won't be on that list. So what the law speaks to that and says, if a family member brings in a death certificate, then we can take them off the list. Otherwise, they get off, you know, on...
Because they didn't vote.
Yes, that's right. They get purged.
How do you verify off-island voters? I mean, you like if you're a student, you know, I know there are exceptions. Like if you're a student going off-island, maybe you're going off-island because you have extended medical issues. But, you know, how do I know I didn't call my cousin that's been living in California for the last 25 years and, you know, I'm running and I want their vote? How do you verify their residency so that they are indeed qualified to vote on Guam, and I'm not just, you know, trying to stack the list with all my off-island relatives, you know, or friends? And
again...
Not that I'm busy doing any of that, okay, just in case you want to investigate me. But how do we address that issue?
Again, in Chapter 10, absentee voting, it states that we, you know, if they're registered to vote and they let us know they're currently registered, they're here on Guam now they're off island, and they request for an off-island ballot, we just have them fill out the application form. And if we have everything intact here, including a copy of their ID, one of the things we do just by sight is try to verify the signature. Other than that, through email, they're letting us know that they're off island and they're looking for a ballot. Another thing, if they were not registered and now they're wanting to register, the MOVE Act, Military and Overseas Voter, says that if this was their last place of residence, they're eligible to vote here for federal elections. We mirror that with the local elections, so it's a procedural thing where, you know, the local election is on the same ballot as the federal election.
Okay. No, I appreciate that clarification. I know you're also put in efforts in the previous election to verify that residents are indeed voting in the village that they declare as their official residence because of the issue with the mayor. I'm assuming primarily the mayoral election, particularly in the southern villages, because I may have lived there 20 years ago and moved. My family may be from there, but I live in Dedido and I'm going to, you know, vote in Inarohan. So I appreciate the efforts to, you know, at least right size and make sure that people are voting in their respective village. But I think I'm going to talk with my colleagues a little more about this issue of affidavits for citizenship, because I'm something about that doesn't settle with me, and I see the potential for abuse, especially just with all the things that the election commission that you have on your plate, and then on top of that, what opportunity are you ever going to go back to verify if indeed these individuals are qualified to vote? Just because I think it's an honor and it's a very valuable process. I just want to make sure the process is clean and we don't have the opportunity for corruption and misuse of that. Other than that, Ms. Maria, I do have to tell you, in my own experience of voting early in this last election, my family, your staff was very professional. They facilitated. I didn't have to wait very long with my family. They went through the process, explained just as you were mentioning, what everything was, and I was able to vote, and before you know it, we were out the door and on our merry way. So I want to commend your staff, even in this pandemic and all the additional steps that were required, even as candidates having to go and file our documents and stuff. Your staff has always been very positive and very helpful in providing their service. So I definitely want to commend you guys for the work that you do. I know it's only certain times of the year when we have elections, and in between you're keeping everything else in order, but when the time comes to stand up and meet the challenge, you and your people have definitely done a wonderful job, so all deserving of the recognition and credit for the work that you do. And thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Brown. And on that note, with the no primary, if you introduce a bill to, we don't have a primary, let the party handle it, I'll support that bill. On that note, Ms. Pangilinan and my colleagues, the committee, we will conclude this public hearing on Bill 120-36. And I see how you made the changes versus 10101 to 10107. We'll make that accordingly. The committee will continue to receive testimony for the next few days. Please address your written testimony to the Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriation, and Housing, and submit it via email to Senator joesanogsi@gmail.com or to my office located at Rand Care Building, 2nd floor, Suite 3, 761 South Marine Corps Drive, Tamuning, Guam. And si Diyos Masi for your attendance, Ms. Pangilinan and Mr. Sanogsi. And for those at home, thank you for watching. The public hearing on Bill 120-36 CR is now adjourned. It is now 2:39. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming. We'll have a quick recess and then we will begin on Bill 140-36, introduced by Senator Blas, while we do the sanitization. Thank you. Good afternoon. The Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriation, and Housing is now called to order. For the record, today is Tuesday, June 22nd, 2021, and the time now is 2:44. Notice for this public hearing were disseminated via email to all senators and all main media broadcasting outlets. First public notice was issued on Tuesday, June 15, 2021, and followed by June 17, 2021. This is Bill 140-36, introduced by Senator Frank Blas Jr. I think it's co-sponsored by everyone. It's co-sponsored by the whole body of the 36th Guam Legislature. An act to add a new Chapter 9 to Title 1 Guam Code annotated relative to creating the Guam Humanitarian Award to recognize all support efforts by individuals for disaster or declared emergency operation activities. I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues that are here today. We have the author of the bill, Senator Frank Blas, Senator Brown, Senator Tony Abbott, and Senator Jim Moylan. I'd ask the author of the bill to please proceed to give his opening, and then we can just have a conversation among the colleagues to the people of Guam about this bill. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to my colleagues for being here today. As you said, Mr. Chair, Bill 140-36 LS is basically legislation that would create what will be known as the Guam Humanitarian Service Award. We continue to experience in this emergency declaration, this pandemic, as well as other disasters previous that Ireland has to deal with. Many times we have our first responders and those individuals who volunteer to be able to help our island and its residents get back up on its feet, as is in the case with this emergency. There are literally, hundreds of individuals, and albeit many of them, that this is in their line of duty, but this is not in their normal line of duty to be able to do this for a prolonged period of time. And in cases of emergencies, a lot of times while we appreciate and we're gratified of the service and the expertise that many individuals provide in being able to help those that have been victimized, help those that were in need as a result of disasters. I felt that a formal, if you will, form of gratitude and recognition for these individuals, for their service in times of disaster, are very deserving of, again, the official recognition by our government, by the people of Guam, through a humanitarian service award. What the bill provides is for the governor to be able to create service awards, lapels and pins that these individuals can proudly wear, whether it be those individuals not just in uniform service or in government service, but also individuals in the community. This is not just restricted or just for government service. This is for those frontline people, those volunteers that work in other places other than with the government of Guam, and so and then also, other than receiving an award, is that the service is, the recognition of the service then becomes appended to our legislative journal, so that as is done in the halls of Congress when there is a recognition provided to an individual, the individual and their families can peruse and can look into the congressional record and see that they were officially recognized. This also provides that same avenue, that same feature, if you will, for this recognition. So it's not that, thank you and goodbye. It's thank you for your service, and it's going to continue to be remembered. And I want to thank all my colleagues. This is a legislation that I'm proud to say that is sponsored by every single member of this legislature. And I'm hoping that, after this process gets on the floor for deliberations signed by the governor, and we can then you avail this award for those individuals who truly deserve to be recognized. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Blas. And yes, as a co-sponsor of this bill, there are many GovGuam employees that deserve recognition, deserve not just a pat on the back, but a pin, a certificate, recognition by the Guam legislature, by the people of Guam for all that they do. And with that note, Senator Moylan, do you have any comments you'd like to offer to the bill? Senator Moylan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to the author of the bill. Yes, I'm in favor of this. I think it's excellent that we do something to recognize those who have did above and beyond and have taken it to all the limits and helped us through this pandemic episode. So thank you to the author of the bill, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Adder, do you have anything you'd like to speak on behalf of this bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, just, looking forward for this bill to go onto session floor so that we may be able to vote on it and get these awards into place and into the hands of the people who really worked hard during this past pandemic and continue to work hard for our people and our island. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Brown, do you have any comments on the bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Certainly just to recognize Senator Frank Blas for his timely introduction of this legislation, certainly considering what our people have been through almost the past year and a half. So I certainly want to extend my appreciation to him, and I think we can guarantee the passage of this bill with all 15 members as his co-sponsor. So again, thank you to Senator Blas, and certainly thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding the hearing on this bill.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Senator Blas, do you have anything else further to say?
No, thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. The committee will continue to receive testimony for the next few days, and please address your written testimony to the Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriation, and Housing, and submit it via email to Senator joe@gmail.com or to my office located at Rand Care Building, 2nd floor, Suite 3, 761 South Marine Corps Drive, Tamuning, Guam. And if time permits, this bill should be ready, transcribed, and forwarded to the Committee on Rules, and hopefully we can get it on the floor for discussion next week. Si Dios mercy for your attendance and participation in today's hearing. And for those at home, thank you for watching. This public hearing on Bill 140-36 LS is now adjourned. It is 3:51. Thank you, and please be safe. Take care.